So
I actually have some stuff for the fantasy this time because
damn.
Isaiah Pacheco and Rashad White. I was gonna say like if they're available in your league, you should pick them up because
Yeah. Yeah. I
they're
mean,
that's a
if
it's a
they are,
good flex.
and they probably,
It's a good flex position. And Rashad White. It remains to be seen how he could play. He could boom. That's why I picked him up real quick. I'm like,
yeah.
ooh, he's taken over. Like he may have not done a lot yet, but he'll be on my bench in case he comes up. Like
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple things. I'm glad you brought that up because right now Lenny is banged up a little bit, so that's one thing. And then also, they really get split carries, and I think they still like Leonard Fournette more in the red zone because he's more of the power guy. But I think now like Rashad is technically the starter,
yeah,
for whatever that's worth. I mean, they pretty much get pretty equal carries, but. Obviously, he's a threat to he's a threat in the passing game as well because he's a good receiving option. So
yeah. That's why I
glad
picked
you
him up. I
mentioned
was like,
that.
there's a lot of good positivity there with him. Like especially if you got players that are hurt, and you get to that point where you're like, oh man, like I have to get somebody. Like it's good to
Yeah.
keep an eye out for these players. Like before it becomes a need. Like you check every week, and
Oh,
it's like
absolutely.
if there's
Yeah.
somebody who, especially if you know what's going on with the team, and usually the fantasy apps kind of tell you, you just
Yeah.
you click on it and it's going to explain to you what the situation is, and then you can find someone that may or may not pan out, but it's better than whoever's on your list that you don't need anymore.
Yeah, and it's always worth looking at the matchups because I mean projections are
Yeah,
helpful, but I mean they're not always accurate because I mean the projection could be completely off. And
yeah,
I mean
totally.
if in a situation like last week when Justin Jefferson had to go up against Trayvon Diggs, and I had to unfortunately deal with this. Justin Jefferson's so good you're not going to sit him, but Trayvon Diggs, who's a great corner. I mean, we know because he shut down Terry a few times, but he held Justin Jefferson to 3 catches for 33 yards. So, you know, really, really not a lot of production out of him. But yeah, so we're going to get into really who we like for week 12 as far as some stardom, sit-em options. Obviously, like Nick said, couple waiver pickups, like Rashad White and
Isaiah Pacheco.
Isaiah Pacheco. Exactly. Yeah, because you picked up Pacheco. Because honestly, if you guys
Well, I
have,
picked them both up. I picked up Pacheco last
yeah,
week. I
yeah,
just picked up Rashad White now because somebody dropped him, and I'm like, well, or maybe you know what it is. I don't think somebody dropped him. I think his projection went higher, so then he was higher on the
okay,
list, and I
yeah. I
happened to
mean,
see
if you're
that.
still holding on to CEH, like you need to drop
Yeah,
CEH. Like
right.
last week, 2 carries for 9 yards. I mean, he is just not getting. In fact, at this point, if you're going to pick up a secondary option to Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon is more worth it to pick up than CEH. Clyde Edwards-Helaire not doing
I think
shit.
there might be better options out there than McKinnon. He seems to get less work than
Not
Pacheco
in our
does.
league.
But
There's not like McKinnon's like the best option right now. It's
oh
rough.
yeah, in ours,
It's
yeah,
slim
on the run.
pickings. Yeah,
Yeah, after I took Rashad White, yeah, he's literally it was him and
slim
McKinnon
pickings.
that were available. So
Yeah. All right. So here's some guys that I like here. So Jeff Wilson getting to go up against
yeah,
obviously a cake Houston defense that ranks 32nd to opposing running backs. Obviously, we just saw them with go head to head against Washington, where Washington ran for 153 on 40 attempts. So teams are gashing Houston, and I don't expect that to change. I also, if you have Raheem as well, I like that as well because they have been getting pretty close work. I mean, it is worth mentioning that.
I have Raheem.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to mention because we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Last week for the Dolphins, Jeff Wilson totaled 61% of the snaps. And let's see here. He racked up 17 rush attempts and 5 targets. So, yeah, I mean, it's seeming like he's getting more favorable, more consistent usage right now than Raheem, which isn't necessarily a great thing if you're a Raheem Mostert owner. But obviously, it could also be another factor that Jeff Wilson coming in with a little bit fresher legs at this point, and obviously Raheem with his injury history could be just Mike McDaniel attempting to give him, a little bit of a breather at this point in the season. But
Yeah.
remains to be seen. But I do like both of them because I think they're both going to go off because B-Rob, Brian Robinson, and Gibson both had pretty good games against Houston, and I expect that to
Gibson had a better fantasy day, I think, but Brian Robinson is what gave us those short power runs and how we maintained the ball possession for 40 minutes. No, I'm thinking of the Eagles game. I'm sorry, but it was also lopsided in the Texans game. I don't remember the
Yeah,
number,
I mean, the time of possession in this game was also 34 minutes to 25 minutes. Or 35 minutes to 25 minutes, 34:56 to 25:04. Okay. So about 10 more minutes. Makes sense.
That's a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I also like, for a matchup this week, James Conner, the Arizona running back, against the Chargers. Obviously, the Chargers rank 30th against the run. They've been getting gashed all season long. James Conner, coming off a really good season last year where it seemed like he scored a touchdown every game, hasn't been producing to quite that level this year, but he does still have 356 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 151 receiving yards, and he's still, Arizona's number 1 back. It's possible that Colt McCoy gets the start, and if that's the case, it's even more likely that Connor's going to get more opportunities because they're going to lean on him even more. There is a possibility Kyler Murray comes back, even if he does. Kyler Murray going to be dealing with that hamstring injury. So either way, I expect James Conner to get a lot of work. So I would go ahead, and if you have James Conner, start him against the Chargers because that's going to be a favorable matchup. And then for another, this is a Chargers player here that I like to start. Josh Palmer, the Chargers wide receiver. He's been going off. They've actually been favoring him over Mike Williams. It's last week Keenan Allen and Mike Williams did come back, but the weeks that those two were out, Herbert developed a good relationship with Josh Palmer, and he's really been having some great seasons. I mean, he's averaging about 12.5 fantasy points per week. And he's going up against an Arizona secondary that's kind of struggled in games past. They just gave up 4 touchdown passes to Jimmy and the 49ers, and obviously, got killed in the passing game on several long run after catches. So I look for him to have a pretty good game. He's gotten 10 targets per game in his last 4 games. So even with Allen and Williams back last week, he still got 10 targets. So I would start him. And at quarterback, I would start Geno Smith. I like him as a quarterback option this week against the Las Vegas defense, which has been
I just put Geno in for Dak.
Yeah. I was gonna say the Vegas defense has been pretty abysmal, so I would definitely go ahead and start Geno this week. Dak has to go against the Giants defense, which has actually been, I think, the strength of their team. The reason why they're winning a lot of those games based on defense, and obviously Saquon's having a great season. But I think Dak's not going to have that great of a game against the Giants defense. We're going to see, though. But Geno obviously has a lot more favorable of a matchup going against the Vegas defense that ranks 29th.
It was a tough choice.
Opposing quarterbacks.
Between them, it was a very tough choice because Dak, he's had 2 really good weeks, the last 2 weeks since coming back from the injury, looking better and better. But Geno, I mean, he's based on his points this year, I think he's ranked 7th out of quarterbacks.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, Geno's averaging 21.7 fantasy points a game, and he's thrown multiple touchdowns in 8 of his 10 games this year. So, and he's had strong performances against top defenses in the past. So we'll have to see. And the Raiders definitely are not a top defense. So, they often allow 20 plus points. It looks like they've, I have a note here that they've allowed 20 plus points in 8 of their 10 games to opposing quarterbacks. The only 2 quarterbacks that didn't have 20 plus points against the Raiders defense this year were Trevor Lawrence and Russell Wilson. So take that for what you want. And then As far as some guys to sit this week, I'll just give you some quick ones real quick. If you're an owner of Deontay Johnson, the Pittsburgh Steelers receiver, I definitely would veer away from starting him this week. Obviously, as we saw last week, Kenny Pickett is favoring George Pickens as his top receiver. He had 4 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown last week. As he continues to become the primary receiver there, Deontay Johnson is kind of, more the secondary option. And often he loses targets to Pat Freiermuth, the tight end, as well. So I would definitely look away from starting him against Indianapolis, especially because Indianapolis does have a pretty good secondary, including Stephon Gilmore at corner. I remember Terry made a pretty good catch over him a couple weeks ago, though, in that game. But Stephon Gilmore is a very good corner, former Pro Bowl player. But yeah, I just don't like that matchup. I think that, and on top of that, even if you're looking at, him getting a lot of targets, Kenny Pickett's kind of been struggling in a lot of these games. So I just don't love that matchup.